This is a demonstration of how thought can lead to free will. Marcus is a philosophy graduate student specializing in metaphysics. He's brilliant, rigorous, and has become convinced through careful argumentation that free will is an illusion. Specifically, he accepts a strong spatial monist position. All cognitive events are merely deterministic spatial reconfigurations. The feeling of agency, choice, deliberation, all epiphenomenal descriptions of what deterministic processes feel like from inside. He's writing his dissertation on this topic. He believes it deeply. He's not being contrarian or provocative. He genuinely thinks he's discovered something true and important about reality. Marcus is at a coffee shop with his friend Elena, a neuroscientist who's skeptical of his position. Elena: so you're saying you have no free will right now? None at all? Marcus: correct. This conversation, my beliefs, even my decision to meet you here, all deterministic outcomes of prior spatial states. I'm just a pattern of cognitive events that a spatial form is carrying out. Elena: okay, but you chose to work on this dissertation topic, right? You could have written about ethics or epistemology or... Marcus: I didn't choose it. The conditions of my prior states led inevitably to this outcome. The feeling of choice is the illusion. Elena: interesting. So when you revise your arguments, when you realize one formulation is weaker than another and you rewrite it, that's not you making choices? Marcus: it's cognitive events responding to other cognitive events. Deterministic process all the way down. Elena: okay, let me try something. I'm going to make a claim about your dissertation. Tell me if I'm right. Marcus: go ahead. Elena: your dissertation argues that Bradley's regress proves ontological divisions are impossible, and therefore reality is a continuous spatial field. You use this to argue that temporal parts don't really exist, which means there's no libertarian free will. Right? Marcus: essentially, yes. Elena: and you chose to structure it that way, starting with Bradley, then moving to temporal ontology, then to free will, because you thought that argumentative sequence was most persuasive? Marcus: I didn't choose it. The argumentative structure that emerged was determined by... Elena: humor me. If I asked you right now to restructure your dissertation to start with the free will problem first, then work backward to Bradley, could you do it? Marcus: well, yes, I could, but that would be less effective because... Elena: stop! You just said you could, but it would be less effective. You're evaluating possible structures against criteria of effectiveness. You're comparing alternatives. You're doing exactly what someone with free will would do. Marcus: pause. No, I'm describing how cognitive events evaluate other cognitive events. The evaluation process is itself deterministic. Elena: okay. New question. Do you want your dissertation to be convincing? Marcus: of course. Elena: why? If everything is deterministic and you have no agency, why does it matter whether it's convincing or not? It'll convince whoever it convinces based on the deterministic spatial states of their brains. Marcus: I want it to be convincing because I care about truth, and if my argument is true, I want others to recognize... Elena: you want something. You care about something. You're trying to achieve an outcome. Marcus: you're exercising goal-directed behavior right now. Marcus: goals are just descriptions of deterministic end states. I don't choose my goals. Elena: did you choose to defend your dissertation topic just now, or did you helplessly watch words come out of your mouth? Marcus, growing frustrated: Elena, I know what you're doing. You're trying to get me to contradict myself by pointing out that I'm defending my position. But that doesn't prove anything. The defense itself is deterministic. I'm not choosing to defend it. The spatial configuration of my brain is producing these defensive responses. Elena: okay, but here's what I find fascinating. Right now, you're monitoring your own responses. You're aware that you're getting frustrated. You're aware that I'm trying to trap you. You're thinking about your thinking. That's metacognition. Marcus: sure, but metacognition is just another layer of deterministic process. Elena: is it? Let's test that. I want you to do something for me. Marcus. What? Elena. For the next 60 seconds, I want you to not defend your dissertation position. If I make a claim about free will, just say, interesting, or I'll think about that, or change the subject. Can you do that? Marcus. Yes, but... Elena. No buts. Just for 60 seconds. Starting now. Marcus, I think free will clearly exists because we can imagine alternative actions and then select among them. Marcus. Pause. Interesting. Elena. We experience ourselves as agents with causal power over our thoughts and actions. Marcus. Longer pause, visibly restraining himself. I'll think about that. Elena. The fact that you're struggling right now is evidence of free will. Marcus. Frustration building but staying quiet. Could we talk about something else? Elena. Time. Okay. What just happened? Marcus, exhaling. I restrained my impulse to argue. But that doesn't mean... Elena, stop. Let's examine what you just did. You had an impulse, the urge to defend your position. You recognize that impulse. Then you recognize that I'd asked you to restrain it. Then you chose to honor my request despite the strong impulse to argue. That's at least 3 levels of metacognition: the impulse, awareness of the impulse, and decision about how to respond to the awareness. Marcus, it's all still deterministic. The choosing to honor your request was just the outcome of competing deterministic pressures. Elena, okay, but here's the key question. Could you have not restrained yourself? Marcus, no, because the initial conditions made it inevitable that I would. Elena, so you had no choice? Marcus, correct. Elena, then why did it feel like effort? Why did you have to restrain yourself if the outcome was inevitable? Marcus, quiet for a moment. The feeling of effort is part of how deterministic processes feel from inside. Elena, Marcus, listen to yourself. You're using metacognitive monitoring right now to defend the claim that metacognitive monitoring is causally inert. You're choosing your words carefully to avoid the trap you see me setting. You're evaluating whether each response I give you weakens or strengthens your position. You're doing all of this in real time. Marcus, but I'm not choosing to do any of that. It's just happening. Elena, okay, here's my challenge. I want you to stop defending your position right now. Permanently. Just admit that you might be wrong and move on with your life. Can you do that? Marcus, no, because I'm not wrong. The arguments are sound. Elena, you just said you can't choose whether to defend your position or not. But now you're giving me a reason for continuing to defend it. The arguments are sound. That reason is functioning as a justification for continued defense. If you had no free will, you wouldn't need justifications. You'd just react. But you're not just reacting, you're deliberating about whether your reasons are good enough to continue. Marcus, the deliberation is deterministic. Elena, then do this. Deliberately believe something you currently don't believe. Right now. Just choose to believe that 2 + 2 = 5. Marcus, I can't do that. Belief doesn't work that way. Elena, exactly. You correctly recognize that you can't directly choose your beliefs about mathematical facts, but can you choose to investigate whether your beliefs about free will are justified? Can you choose to read arguments on the other side with genuine openness? Marcus, I suppose I could. Elena, could or will? Marcus, long pause. I don't want to. Elena, why not? Marcus, because I've already spent 2 years developing this position. Changing now would feel like wasted effort. Elena, so you're choosing to maintain your belief because changing would be costly, not because you're certain the belief is true? Marcus, that's not... Elena. Marcus, you just performed a metacognitive evaluation of your own belief maintenance strategy. You recognize that sunk cost is influencing your thinking. That recognition itself is a form of control. You could choose to overcome the sunk cost fallacy right now, to say, actually, I should investigate this more carefully regardless of how much time I've invested. The fact that you're not choosing to do that is itself a choice. Marcus, rubbing his temples. Okay, I see what you're doing. You're claiming that the very act of defending determinism requires exercising the metacognitive control that determinism denies. But I still think you're just describing what deterministic processes feel like from inside. The fact that it feels like I'm choosing doesn't mean I actually am. Elena, fair enough. Let me try one more thing. I'm going to describe two versions of you, Marcus 1 and Marcus 2. Tell me which one describes you better. Marcus. Okay. Elena. Marcus 1 simply has beliefs that arise from deterministic processes. When challenged, responses come out automatically. There's no gap between stimulus and response. Someone says free will exists, and Marcus 1 immediately produces counter-arguments without any intervening reflection. Like a reflex. Marcus 2 has beliefs, notices when those beliefs are challenged, evaluates whether the challenge is serious, considers how to respond, monitors his own emotional reactions, frustration, defensiveness, decides whether those reactions are appropriate, and shapes his responses based on reflective evaluation of what he wants to achieve in the conversation. There are gaps between stimulus and response filled with deliberation. Which one is you? Marcus, quietly. Marcus 2. Elena. Right. And here's the thing. Marcus 1 couldn't successfully defend determinism in an argument because he can't adapt to novel challenges. He can only produce automatic responses. But you, Marcus 2, can defend it precisely because you have metacognitive control. You monitor the conversation, evaluate my arguments, adjust your strategy, recognize when you're being trapped, and try to avoid it. The performative contradiction is this. The very capacity that lets you defend the claim, I have no free will, is the capacity that constitutes free will under my definition. You're using recursive self-monitoring and preference-guided deliberation to argue that recursive self-monitoring and preference-guided deliberation don't constitute meaningful agency. Marcus. But even Marcus 2's deliberation is deterministic. Elena. I'm not denying that. I fully grant that everything you're doing is deterministic, causally produced by prior spatial states, whatever. My point is that some deterministic systems have a certain structural property, metacognitive recursion with preference-guided self-modification, and other deterministic systems don't. The ones that have it exhibit what we call free will. It's not libertarian free will. It's not magic. It's not uncaused causation. It's a functional property of certain complex systems. And Marcus, you can't coherently deny that you have this property because exercising it is the only way you can formulate the denial. Marcus sits quietly for a long moment. Marcus, so what you're saying is, even if I'm right that everything is deterministic, that doesn't eliminate free will, it just relocates it? Makes it a property of certain deterministic systems? Elena, yes. And here's the really interesting part. You now have to decide whether to accept this reframing or continue fighting it. Notice what you're doing right now. You're metacognitively evaluating whether to modify your position. You're weighing the intellectual costs and benefits. You're checking whether accepting my framing would require abandoning claims you're committed to, or whether you can integrate it. That process, the one happening in your mind right now, is free will. It's you at a metacognitive level, deciding what you want to believe based on reflective evaluation of reasons. You can't escape it. Even deciding to reject my argument requires exercising the very capacity I'm pointing to. Marcus, small smile. That's annoyingly clever. Elena, here's your choice, and you can't avoid making it. You can continue insisting that what you're experiencing right now, this deliberation, this weighing of considerations, this wondering whether to revise your dissertation, is pure illusion with no causal efficacy. Or you can accept that this structure of recursive self-monitoring is both real and causally relevant, even if it's deterministic. What will you choose? Marcus. And Marcus realizes whatever he says next will be a choice. Even I don't choose would be a choice. Even refusing to answer would be a choice. The metacognitive structure Elena has pointed to is inescapable. He can call it whatever he wants: deterministic process, cognitive events, spatial reconfiguration, but the structure remains. He is trapped by his own capacity for recursion. Marcus, after a very long pause. I need to think about this. Elena. See? You just chose to defer judgment rather than commit to an answer right now. You exercised metacognitive control over your belief formation process. That's free will, Marcus. That's what it looks like. The Marcus-Elena dialogue reveals several questions that Mike's spatial monism must answer. The performance problem. If free will is pure illusion with no causal efficacy, how can Marcus successfully defend his position at all? Defense requires monitoring his arguments for weaknesses, evaluating challenges in real time, adjusting strategy based on evaluation, restraining automatic responses when needed. This is exactly the structure we call free will. If it's causally inert, it can't do this work. If it does this work, it's not causally inert. 2. The effort problem. Why does restraint require effort if the outcome is inevitable? Marcus experiences genuine difficulty when trying not to argue. If determinism is true and the outcome was fixed, what is the effort doing? What is its function in the spatial reconfiguration? 3. The justification problem. Why does Marcus need reasons to maintain his position if his maintenance of it is inevitable? The reasons function as causes. They're what sustain his belief. But if his belief is purely determined by prior spatial states, the reasons are either A. Causally efficacious, which means metacognitive evaluation has causal power, or B. Epiphenomenal, which means they're not really the reason he maintains the belief. If B, then Marcus is systematically confused about his own cognitive processes. But that confusion would be maladaptive. Why would evolution produce elaborate metacognitive machinery that systematically misleads us about what's causing our behavior? 4. The recursion problem. Marcus can think about his thinking about his thinking. Each level of recursion opens new possibilities. If all of this is just spatial reconfiguration, what is the mechanism by which recursive depth matters? Why does a system with 3 levels of metacognition behave differently than a system with 1 level, if their recursion does no causal work? 5. The inescapability problem. Marcus cannot formulate his denial without exercising the capacity he's denying. This isn't just a rhetorical problem, it's ontological. The very structure that allows him to understand, evaluate, and defend the claim, "I have no free will," is the structure that constitutes free will under the functional definition. Mike must explain, what is the ontological status of a capacity that cannot be coherently denied because denying it requires exercising it? The genius of Elena's approach is that she doesn't try to prove free will exists independently of determinism. She shows that free will is a structural property that emerges from deterministic systems with sufficient metacognitive depth. Marcus can call it spatial reconfiguration if he wants. But he cannot deny that. The performative contradiction is inescapable. You cannot coherently deny having free will because the denial itself requires exercising free will. Mike's spatial monism can accept that everything is deterministic. But it cannot explain away the functional reality of metacognitive recursion without rendering its own defense impossible.